Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. We have a historic fight this weekend. The dream, Devin Haney, stands in the way of Vasyl Lomachenko's dream of becoming the undisputed lightweight champion. We're going to get deep, we're going to get technical, break this fight down and come up with a prediction as well. We'll start off with the dream, Devin Haney. When I was doing the preview to Haney Kambosos 2, I refer to him as the spearman. That was the spearman against the swordman. This is actually going to be the spearman against the bee. We're going to continue to use these analogies. But essentially, Devin Haney likes to keep you on the edge of a spear. He likes distance between his torso, his body, his head, and the opponent. And he does this in a manner which is not always conducive with the sort of stance that he has. Because usually when you want to be mobile and move around the ring, you might want to have a more narrow stance than Devin's. And when you want to produce a lot of power, that's when you tend to have a bit of a wider stance, a more solid base. Ironically, he's not a power puncher, and yet he's very good at maintaining distance control. So the method in which he does that is actually by widening that stance and lowers himself to the level of the opponent, and he keeps that lead leg pointed quite far out, as you can see, and he probes with that left hand just by touching. You see how he's touching Jojo there? He's not actually throwing jabs quite often. He's literally just having it as an extra barrier. Jojo has to bypass that lead leg and bypass that lead arm to come around Devin at angles. And what Devin will do if Jojo tries to enter, he'll either extend that back foot further back to lean back further and create spacing, or he'll kick off of the front foot. And in the midst of all that, he'll also mix it up with quite a stiff jab. He's a very good jabber, and he offsets you with that lead hand. As you can see, there's obstacles, and he will pump the body as well to make sure that you can't get through to him easily. And another thing with Devin, when he's going to throw the right hand, quite often that right leg comes off of the floor, as you can see there. And that can actually take power away from the right hand, because you're not coiling from the ground up really. He throws it and almost leans forward at points and then swings that leg around. But how this works for him is that by planting his leg in another position with his legs still quite wide, he doesn't really square on. He does it and swings it around, but his stance is quite wide still. He gets into a new angle and he comes off at the side, and that means that he's created a new pocket. So again, everything's about movement, distance, and creating new pockets so that you can't enter that pocket. So it makes him very hard to get to. But there are trade-offs to the way that Devin Haney operates. Firstly, if you get that back foot off the floor every time you throw it, but when you do then replant your foot, there's a moment where you have to reset. You have to re-establish your stance. That slight delay against the guy who's going to be able to come in the pocket and stay there and change the angles on you in the pocket can be a problem. Now, in terms of the philosophy of his stance, Virgil Hunter really would like what Devin Haney's doing here. I've heard him give these sorts of instructions to his own fighters before. A wide stance with that lead leg pointed out, it's stuck forward. It's quite a wide stance with a lead arm out as well. This gives Jojo two obstacles to overcome before anything happens. He needs to get past that lead hand and he needs to step around that lead leg. There are two obstacles. You can't run through that leg. You can't run through that arm. If you do get through that, you've then got the backhand to deal with. So there are three obstacles before you can get to Devin Haney. However, if you do rush Devin and come in quickly, and you do get that lead foot on the outside of his lead foot, and you are able to bypass that jab, you come underneath it, then Devin Haney wants to step back to generate that extra space to keep you on the edge of the spear. But whilst he can do that with the first phase of attack, because his legs will become wider, his stance becomes wider as he steps out, he then has to recover that. And before he brings his stance narrow, there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to retreat. So what does he tend to do? He tends to bend at the hip. And we'll talk about that because it's something he does very well, but it also provides a pattern. But first, let me just show you how he likes to go to the body just to ensure that you're not coming in. You can't just rush this guy in, rush in against this guy. And because Jojo here is using a high guard, something we'll talk about later, to try and edge his way in, it's left a gap where the solar plexus is. And Devin Haney is lowering his body by dipping at the knees and shooting that shot into the solar plexus, which prevents Jojo from just being able to walk in on him. So we know that this is another weapon of Devin Haney's. And in the clinch, as you can see there, he will happily hold with his left hand. He'll do this quite often, dip his body to the right hand side and shoot an uppercut up close into the solar plexus. So that's the area that he likes to target predominantly to the body. Now, another thing he's very good at is that level change. He's very agile at the hips. And when you do try to attack him, one of the key areas of his defense, which he does quite consistently, is bend at the waist and get out of the way. As you can see there, he can bend at the waist and step out to change the range, maximize the range again. Or he can pivot out after he's dipped down, which can create a new angle. Again, that thing about creating a new pocket. Or alternatively, something we'll show you later, he'll push off the back foot and thrust his shoulder into your solar plexus and then rise up from there to tie you up, basically. And that's why a lot of people struggle with breaking away from the clinch of Devin Haney, because if you overreach, because you're trying to reach this slippery guy that's getting away, and he actually comes into you, it's like running into a target. Imagine you're chasing after something and it's really fast and you're running at full speed, and then all of a sudden it reverses and comes straight into you. You're a lot more likely to clatter into it, right? So that's what he's very good at doing, but he offers a pattern. Because he is so keen to consistently dip at the waist, it does provide a pattern. And when you can be quite sudden with him and get him into a position where he's uncomfortable, because he is not really a complete fighter. He's fantastic at what he does. He's elite at what he does, but he's not a complete fighter in the sense that he doesn't have much of an inside game at all. His inside game is predominantly to try and tie up. He'll dip down low to get into a position where he's safe, trying to turn away from you. And then if he's still uncomfortable, he will seek to tie up. From there, he can, if you're forcing him to punch with you, he can potentially start throwing a few uppercuts, some little shots to the body. He's not completely useless there, but it's an underdeveloped inside game, certainly at the elite level. And you can see in all these areas, the minute he gets tagged, he ducks. That's his go-to maneuver. So there's a pattern there for you to target. But how do you initiate that entry to ensure that he is in a position of panic? How do you do it? Well, Jojo Diaz, being a southpaw, and it's significant to look at that in this particular fight, he would come in behind a high guard. Now, a lot of fighters tend to do this when they're fighting fighters of an opposite stance. Floyd Mayweather used to do this a lot against southpaws as well. You come in behind that high guard, you know that essentially you're going to walk in behind this shield and force your feet closer before you start to let go of your hands. Kambosos did not do this at all against Devin Haney, and this was one of the biggest errors that he made. He would keep that lead hand low and he's essentially inviting the jab to come through, whereas when you've got that lead hand up, what can happen is you've taken away the trajectory for the jab to find a home. And for a fighter like Devin, whose jab is so key to what he does, he struggles sometimes to ensure that you stay out of range. And you can see Jojo was very clever at coming in, forcing his way in and letting go of combinations or sporadic powerful pot shots. The problem that Jojo had is that it was too sporadic. He wasn't doing this often enough. He was quite slow with his feet. And despite being quite slow with his feet and plodding in, he was still able to get him close enough time and time again. And that's something that could potentially play a role in this fight, and we'll get to that later on. Now, what happens if you do put Devin Haney into a position where he has to exchange and he doesn't want to in the pocket? He holds. This is something that he's been accused of consistently. You've seen networks sort of have a clinch count when they're talking about Devin Haney's fight, but it is very excessive. It is dirty. He's a dirty fighter, Devin Haney. He'll get you in a headlock. He'll hit you while he's got you in that headlock. He'll lean all over you. His feet sometimes look like they're horizontal off the floor. He'll come low and then thrust into you. As you can see here, he's looking to initiate the clinch after coming in low and then pushing George back. Again there. Here, he just climbs all over him. You'll see this consistently. There, it's just a straight up cuddle. He just wants a little cuddle, poor Devin. He doesn't want to fight. But it is difficult to deal with. Now, the referee should really be stopping this. After you've done this 3-4 times, you should be given a warning. If you continue to do that, you should have points taken away, because you're stopping the opponent from being allowed to operate up close. And this is something that a lot of fighters have a problem with. So Devin has been very smart calling Loma a dirty fighter in the build up to this fight. Loma is not a dirty fighter. You are allowed to fight coming out of a break. If the referee says stop, then you're not allowed to throw punches. If he says break, you come apart, and the moment you come apart, you're allowed to operate again. If one arm is free, again, you're allowed to operate. What Devin doesn't want is for Loma to be operating in those moments, because he wants to be able to stabilize him. He wants to keep him at range and then hold him. So by referring to Loma as a dirty fighter, if Loma starts to get really busy on the inside to try and stop this clinch, then the referee might say to Loma, Loma, you're using your forehead to try and break out of the clinch. You're throwing punches on the break, in the hope that he can stop Loma from being able to operate and he can continue to nullify the fight. This will be a key situation, and if Haney can do that, this could be an easy night's work for Devin Haney. But does Lomachenko have the arsenal to exploit these issues of Devin Haney? Well, to me, Loma is a little bit reminiscent of AB. I want you to imagine you're sitting in your back garden. It's a beautiful summer's day. You're enjoying the sunshine, a gentle breeze, and all of a sudden you hear this buzzing sound around your ear. You open your eyes, you stop sunbathing. What is that now? Is it a mozzie? No, it's not. It's a big fat bumblebee, and it's threatening to sting you. So you start trying to swat it away. And there's that constant threat of a sting. And this is what Loma does. He flies around you, buzzes around you, and he offers a constant threat with foot pressure, with shoulder feints, with knee feints. He uses that lead arm and rotates it and lowers it and pretends he's going to drop it to your body or come up with a hook or come up with a straight shot. He threatens a very fast entry point, and he does this consistently by staying on the edge of the pocket. Loma is essentially a pressure fighter. I know that this is not what people associate a skilled fighter with. People think that skilled fighters are back foot boxers that are elusive. Loma is a terrific defensive fighter. I mean, Lomachenko is a terrific defensive fighter. There is a narrative in some quarters that he's easy to hit. That's ludicrous. It's a lot easier to be a defensive fighter, so to speak, when you're on the back foot and not offering a target. When you are in the pocket constantly looking to pressure or on the edge of pocket and you are taking away an opponent's offense, that is truly incredible in terms of defense. Same way that Roman Chocolatito is a brilliant defensive fighter. In fact, Canobio was talking to Chris Algieri and they were basically discussing the CompuBox numbers and saying that Lomachenko has 1.8 jabs a round that land on him on average. And whilst Devin Haney is a very prolific jabber, against Jojo Diaz, who is a southpaw, he landed 10 jabs in the entire fight. So if Lomachenko is going to be able to take that jab away from Devin Haney, that's another thing that you're going to have to think about as well. But that threat, that constant threat of the sting leads you to do what? It leads you to start trying to swat the bee away. And you're doing it at this frenetic tempo because you're worried this bee's going to sting me and I've got a bee allergy. Well, what happens is when you start to force Loma back though, because he is not, remember, a back foot boxer predominantly, what he will do with these very fast feet is just step out of the pocket. When you start swinging at the bee to swat the bee isn't trying to sting your hand while you're doing that. The bee's just trying to avoid your hand. And when you're done swinging, the bee comes back in. You see how Loma exits there and then rotates around? Look at him rotating around. And when he seeks to plant to come back in, that's when he's looking to threaten again. And we'll get to that later. But you see that how he steps out and he's just taking shots off of the gloves, the forearms, the wrists. Now, a lot of people will look at this sort of thing and they'll say, this is ring generalship. I'm scoring this sort of round to Lomachenko because nothing is really landing from Jermaine Ortiz. They're only glancing sort of shots, and that's if they're getting through. The majority of them are not. So what Loma's doing by making Ortiz swing away and swat away at that bee, he's making him tire himself out. I personally don't score fights based on ring generalship, to be honest with you, though, because even if one punch gets through from Ortiz and none get through from Lomachenko, then yes, Loma is investing to win the later rounds. But in this present moment in time, Loma is actually getting outlanded. So in the early rounds against Ortiz, in the early rounds against Teofimo Lopez, he does give up rounds. And a lot of people call that downloading. I mean, I'm sure he's reading data as well and reading your patterns, but a lot of it is also to try and take away your energy levels when you're trying to swap. It's that constant threat of his entry and that sting. Now, when he does finally figure out your angles and he is able to get that lead foot position into areas that he wants to start stepping around you or even coming inside and letting go of those short, fast combinations, he can often lead with the backhand to surprise you. He can come with a straight shot, work his way low and move his way up. You saw there where Ortiz tried to tie him up. He lowered his legs, pulled his arms out to create a little bit of spacing and then let go again of combinations. When he's in full flow like this, there are a few sights better than Lomachenko. And you saw there, Jermaine Ortiz tried to change the level. He does it again there and he gets stepped around. This is something that if Loma finds a rhythm against Devin Haney and Haney is tiring because he's having to put in a big effort to try and keep Loma away, and Loma is in this sort of range here where he's at inner mid range and close range, he could potentially be lighting up Devin Haney. The question is, how can he do this consistently? Is he going to be able to do this early enough? Or is that little thing where he starts to step out, that thing that people call downloading data, and he's taking the power off of the shots of Devin, but he's still getting outlanded? Is that going to last too long? You see, when it came to Teofimo Lopez, he had a very serious power threat. Devin Haney doesn't. So maybe Loma will not see the threat from Haney as severe. And so he'll be willing to run through the red light, so to speak, earlier in the fight. He'll be willing to start entering the pocket more quickly. He won't have to wait as long for Teofimo to start losing that edge and losing that blunt force trauma that he can generate with his punches. So will Devin Haney be able to keep Lomachenko on the outside? Well, whilst Loma is excellent at coming inside and he's very difficult to read, you can see that at points you can time him with a lead left hand. You saw that little short jab that first came there. Ortiz threw a right hand just to keep him on the back foot. There was a throwaway left jab followed by a wide left hook. Because Loma's looking to rotate that lead hand and drop that lead hand and eventually change the levels and enter the pocket, even though he does this in unpredictable ways because the distance of his step to enter varies each time. So the target and the speed that it comes at you varies. It's kind of like facing a baseball pitcher, and 1 minute he throws a fastball, then he throws a curveball, other times a slow ball or whatever. Because of that, it's harder to time the ball, right? Same sort of thing with Loma. But if you can time him, it is possible to drop a little left hook or a straight left hand on his entry. And Devin Haney's actually quite good at doing those sorts of things. So he'll be looking to do that to ensure that Loma doesn't enter as quickly. In addition to that, because Loma may employ the sort of high guard that Jojo Diaz employed, and when he is exiting to stay away from you, he'll often use the high guard as well. And because he's looking to change the levels and keep his hands in position where he can shoot them without having to load up, so he's not rotating and trying to bring a shot back towards you, he'll shoot from the shoulder. He does leave space around the level of the solar plexus, and we've already shown you that Devin Haney can find a bullseye to that area of the body, and you can see here Jermaine Ortiz had some success with doing things like that as well. Now, in addition to that, size matters. If Devin Haney is going to be allowed to get away with dirty tactics, it does matter that he's bigger. It does matter that he's more youthful and that Loma might not be able to enter the pocket in the same way that he used to. I know that a lot of Devin Haney fans are already saying the Loma fans are using these things as an excuse. They're almost, waiting for the Loma fans to bring this up if Devin Haney is to win, and so they're preempting that. But you can't pretend that physical attributes and that youth doesn't count in boxing. Devin Haney himself referred to Lomachenko as too old and too small when he was going to fight Teofimo Lopez. Now, a few years have passed since then. Loma is no younger, and he's certainly no bigger either. So if Lomachenko is going to be seeking to enter and Devin's going to be allowed to come in low and come up in exactly that way and tie up Lomachenko, as you can see, Loma tried to put his forehead on the shoulder of Ortiz there. He rolled the right arm over the leader arm of Ortiz, looking to get his own shots off. These are the areas where Devin's going to start accusing Loma of being dirty. If Loma is not able to keep Devin off him, he's going to really struggle to get off with his work. In addition, you can see here with Teofimo Lopez, there are simple pushes that break his construct. And you saw against George Kambosos, Devin Haney is not averse to using a push, a headlock, all sorts of things to break the construct of the opponent. So a lot of this fight, the outcome of it will depend on the referee Harvey Dock. How much is he going to take a role in this? Is he going to stop the clinching? And if he does, you could have some real exchanges. And if you do, Devin Haney's not really comfortable in those areas. Having said that, he's a significantly bigger man. So even if he starts throwing these hooks towards the body and he's landing on the shoulders and the biceps, what can happen often is that you'll see Lomachenko's body move, and he's catching a lot of those shots. They're not scoring shots, but it can affect the judges because he's looking like he's getting ragdolled a little bit, and he can look like he's uncomfortable. He is against significantly bigger men. I had Steve Kim on the other day. Check out those discussions that we had. Protocols that Devin Haney goes through just to make weight. And he explained that if we were back in the day where we had same day weigh-ins, Devin Haney would probably be a welterweight. And you also have to understand this fight, the weigh-in's even earlier than it usually is. It's in the morning of the Friday rather than being in the afternoon in the way Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia was. So they're starting to use weigh-ins now as weapons, these fighters. And that is a massive deal because Lomachenko is a tiny lightweight. He's really a super featherweight or featherweight. So you're talking about a number of weight classes in natural size between these guys. Size matters. How do I think this fight will go? You know, it really can go either way. A lot will depend on how long it takes Lomachenko to bypass that shield of Devin Haney's and get inside. If he falls behind to a wide lead and he has far too much of a gap to close, it probably won't be a good night for Lomachenko. The second area where it could be decided is on the inside. Once he does bypass, is he going to be allowed to operate? If they are exchanging and he's punching with Devin Haney, Lomachenko is vastly superior tactically and technically speaking on the inside, in which case he could really turn the fight on its head in the latter half of the fight. Having said that, I think it will take a period of time before Devin is starting to be warned for holding. By this point, Devin might have built up quite a significant lead. And so if you're talking about sheer probability, I think Lomachenko will probably take a little bit too long to get going before a really good finish. But ultimately, I think Devin will probably just do enough to win the fight on points in a close but contested outcome. Having said that, if Lomachenko is able to operate on the inside, if he's able to deal with the size of Devin Haney and the physical strength of Devin Haney, then he could do something very special here in this fight. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.